Hi, I'm Katie Kenline. I'm a sophomore here at Grove City College, and we are live at the Post-Roe America conference for the Institute for Faith and Freedom with Dr. David Ayers. Thank you for being here
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Ayers is a professor of sociology here at Grove City College, and he is the author of multiple books, including his newest, After the Revolution, Sex and the Single Evangelical. Would you give us a little overview of the presentation that you got to give at this conference this morning?
Well, I mean, we looked at hard facts about the degree to which professing Christians accept abortion, particularly abortion for any reason, which is the most liberal position on abortion. And then probably even more disturbing to a lot of people, the degree to which professing Christians have actually engaged in abortion. And not only what we see in the surveys, but the fact that the surveys all seriously undercount to some extent. So we went through that, and then we tried to look at some of the reasons for this and what we could do, kind of combined with what do we do? You know, how do we turn this around?
Would you share, I think some people don't realize the extent to which abortion is prevalent in their church or in their faith community. Would you share with our audience about some of your findings that are out there but maybe not well known about people who've had abortions who are in church or hold a more liberal view of abortion?
Sure. And, you know, Allen Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm of Planned Parenthood, has looked at this as well. It's a little bit harder for them because when you go in to get an abortion, they don't ask for your religion, but they've occasionally done studies that kind of correlate with what I was saying today. I deal with, in my book on Christian marriage, I actually talk about the Guttmacher studies that really were based on talking to women at abortion clinics who were getting abortions and asking them for their religious beliefs and practices. So they correlate pretty well. But so if you take evangelicals 37 to 44 years of age who've ever been pregnant, which is women, you're looking at roughly 14 or 15% that admitted to having had an abortion in a survey where validation research has shown us that about half of women who have had an abortion won't admit it. That they'll give one of the other outcomes to the pregnancy they're talking about. So we're looking at probably a quarter, would be conservative estimate, to as many as 3 out of 10 who've, if the NSFG is correct and if the validation research is correct, have had an abortions. Even if it is, quote, only 15 or 20%, that's still quite a few.
And so what role do you think the church plays in disseminating truth and, I know you said earlier, boldly teaching orthodox truth, and really taking that into account? What balance do you see there?
Well, obviously, we have to talk to different groups in different ways. Different age groups, we need to talk to them differently. Same truth, different way of presenting it. Obviously, we need to approach people in a very lateral way. We're sinners dealing with sinners. You know, we're not basically hammering them. We're not condemning them, but we're also not backing away from the awfulness of what they're proposing or what they're doing. We have to be willing to tackle that heads up. But we also need, and this I talked about this first, is we have to have a theological and ethical framework that this makes sense in. Because the way that we do theology these days in the Christian world is really more moralistic therapeutic deism. It's a very friendly, happy, want you to be happy God who's our therapist. And so even if we say that something's sin, we've essentially made sin not a big deal. So unless we're teaching the larger framework of Christianity accurately and really presenting the truth about who God is and who we are as his creatures, any of our teaching about abortion isn't really going to make any sense, because I see this all the time, even with students here. It's like, yeah, that's a sin, but. And the minute I hear that's a sin, but, I know what's about to follow is, but don't judge me, man. Jesus doesn't judge me. You know, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, you're judged very severely. That's why he went to the cross. He does judge you, but then he forgives you if you repent and turn to him in faith. So we really need to get back to that. And a lot of our pastors are afraid to speak up on this. They don't want to be divisive. They don't want to be political. They don't want to be offensive. As if the only choices we have is between absolute silence on the moral issue of our time, which is harming many people in our churches, or being cruel, mean, nasty, which is a false choice.
Yes.
That's not really it at all. We have to be, you can be direct and kind at the same time. In fact, if you're not direct, you're not really being kind because you're failing to tell a person what they really need to hear.
Yeah. Do you have a direct but kind message to the pro-choice Christian, or something that people could say to a peer or someone they know that's a pro-choice Christian, is the label they've taken on?
You are dangerously close to inventing a new kind of Christianity that isn't real Christianity at all. And you think you're helping people, but you're not. And you need to look at this carefully and repent. Either that, or explain why David said that he was formed in the mother's womb and that God knew him there. Explain how John recognized Jesus when both of them were in the womb. Explain to us whether or not it would have been cool for Mary to have aborted Jesus, because, by the way, I can't imagine a least convenient pregnancy than a working class woman engaged to a godly, righteous man in Israel 2,000 years ago, who's pregnant out of wedlock.
Yeah.
Would you have been okay with that? So I think that they really need to be confronted directly, and rather than let's just all coexist. It's like we've turned the church into a kind of a hippie bumper sticker. Coexist. I don't see coexist in the Gospels. I see if you're not for me, you're against me. If you don't gather, you scatter. No man comes to the Father but by me. It's a very exclusive, very difficult, very hard message. We learn about the narrow way. We are not given, there is no pretension anywhere in the Bible that we're being given an easy religion that's going to make people instantly like us. We shouldn't add to that by being obnoxious and unlikable. But we have got to speak the truth, and ultimately the pro-choice Christians have got to accept the fact that they've got blood on their hands, and yet the forgiveness of God is there. And I know many real believers who embraced that and then rejected it and turned to a pro-life position, and it's no more of an unforgivable sin than any of my sins are. They're all basically the same.
No, that's wonderful. I think it's a great charge to Christians. Would you, just to close, would you tell us about your new book, some of your other work, and where people could find more of your work?
Well, I wrote a book for youth, for Reformed Youth Ministries, on sex, dating, and courtship that came out a few months ago. I wrote a book for Modern Reformation, Why Would Anyone Get Married, on marriage, and that came out last year. On this abortion issue, I've written on to the Catholic audience in Crisis magazine, and I've written a number of articles for them, specifically targeting the Catholic community. On the Gospel Coalition, I recently wrote a piece on abortion there as well, right after Dobbs' decision came down.
Yep.
Asking pastors to look carefully at their churches and consider all the people in their churches who've been involved in this and need confession and healing for what's going on. So there's been all that. Christianity Today, on living out of wedlock among Christians, that was a cover story, March 21, I think. So I've had some of my Presbyterian friends tell me, and I'll literally quote one of them, "Dave, you are too ecumenical, guilty as charged. I want to see all Christians prospering and serving God in ways that are faithful and working together to turn the tide of our culture." And so Wesleyan, Calvinist, Baptist, Catholic, Anglican, I have very strong doctrinal opinions, but I really, and my publishing looks like that. Like people will go, wait a second, how'd you do Crisis Magazine and then a couple months later you're doing the Gospel Coalition? You're being interviewed by a priest in Cincinnati and then you're being, and it's like, well, because that's what I want to do. So anyway, so those works are easily available. It's not hard to Google me and find me. So anyway. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Dr. David Ayers. Make sure you check out his work and his new book, After the Revolution, Sex and the Single Individual. Evangelical, Sex and the Single Evangelical. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
For more information on the Institute for Faith and Freedom, visit faithandfreedom.com.